Okay, should be recording. So today we're going to talk about reading comprehension and how it connects to literacy. My name's Natalie.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Caleb.
And I'm Olivia.
So first we're going to talk about what even is comprehension. I found this definition that I really liked from Clements. He defines reading comprehension as the ability to read text, process it, and understand its meaning. I really liked how he mentioned process and understand it. It's reading comprehension is pretty much making a sense of what you're reading. There are a few key elements of reading comprehension that I'm going to touch on. The list could go on and on depending on how in depth you want to get into it, but today I'm just going to focus on these skills. The first one's vocabulary. Vocabulary is the understanding of the meaning of words. With limited vocabulary, students may struggle with reading comprehension, and their reading comprehension may be impacted, which kind of connects to background knowledge, right? If a student has had limited background experiences, they haven't maybe been read to, they don't read a lot at home, they kind of just stay home all day, whatever the case may be, if they're not experiencing the world around them, they may have impacted reading comprehension. Next is decoding. That's the reading of words accurately and fluently. If your students' decoding skills are slow, reading comprehension suffers since the main focus is on getting through what the word even says on the paper instead of what the meaning of the word is trying to get you to understand. Next is understanding of written language and text structures. This is just recognizing grammar, sentence patterns, and the organization of text, like the story structure, where the title falls, if it has subheadings, anything like that, which helps a student kind of predict what's going to happen next in the story, maybe by chapter titles, or if there's a lot of exclamation points or question marks, the student can kind of pinpoint what we're trying to get from a text. If it's more of a narrative versus like an informational text, things like that. With readers with strong reading comprehension skills, make predictions, visualize while they're reading. Without reading comprehension skills, like the ones I just talked about, comprehension becomes more of a memorization skill than a student understanding, I keep saying, what they're reading. And I think some of the key, most important things to remember about reading comprehension is that it's a combination of applying the skills like vocabulary, background knowledge, etc., and actively thinking about what you're reading. And by improving all the skills I just listed, a reader can deepen their understanding and turn reading into a lifelong skill that they use forever. And next is Ryan.
Perfect. So now that we have heard more about what comprehension is at its core, and we expanded on that a little bit, we're going to talk about why comprehension is important. So the first point that the same article that Natalie was talking about was that comprehension is a very integral part for language proficiency. So it really is at the heart. If you look at language in general and like proficiency in a language, you have to be able to comprehend that language in a written or a verbal way. But it's not just about recognizing words on a page, like Natalie said. It's about truly understanding what those words mean when you put them together. And even if a student understands maybe a few words in a sentence and can comprehend one or two words and pick them out, that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to comprehend. They may just be decoding. But when we do comprehend, we're also engaging a lot of key skills at the same time. And we're understanding vocabulary usage, we're processing the syntax of a text, you're decoding, like we talked about, and you have to do so accurately. So a lot of pieces of comprehension come together, and it does take a lot of skills, so it can take a lot of practice to develop, but that's why it's so important, especially to start young in younger readers. And all of those elements we just mentioned work together to help us make sense of language as a whole. It's really, really difficult to achieve comprehension without any of those smaller parts that go into it. And comprehension is honestly what allows somebody to move beyond just reading or just hearing words out loud and to actually using the language meaningfully and effectively and being able to use that as a way to communicate as well. And then next as well is it stimulates cognitive development. So we mentioned it really briefly before, but comprehension does play a very large role in how young minds can develop cognitively. When we are reading, not just to read, but reading with understanding, brains are doing a lot more than one is when they're just decoding words and saying them aloud. It does a lot of complex functions, and you're using a lot of different aspects of your brain. You're using your working memory to hold on to ideas, both long term and short term. You're losing, or not using, so sorry, you're using attention to follow the flow of that information. You're using problem solving skills, even if you're navigating maybe a new piece of text. And it can go even deeper when one begins to interpret the meaning or even predict what would come next. So that also can include sequencing and putting ideas in an order to make sense of the cause and effect relationship between the words on the page. So comprehension, as you see, isn't really a base level thing. It goes pretty deep and can take a lot of cognitive ability to do. So when we engage in that comprehension, you're not only doing so to improve reading, you're strengthening the overall thinking process that goes into it. So it's a very essential process within the reading process. And then lastly, comprehension is honestly the ultimate goal of reading. Someone might have very strong decoding skills, like we talked about, but just because a student is able to pronounce every word perfectly in a sentence, they may not understand what they're reading, and they're not really gaining anything from that reading. Reading without that comprehension base is like looking at a picture and not even being able to see what is being represented in that image. So it is the understanding and the meaning of the text that transforms reading from just a mechanical and rote memorization skill into a tool for learning and a lot more complex ability. So you can also apply this in a universal way to other subjects. Comprehension is very important when you also move into science, history, even math, without being able to comprehend what's going on in those subject areas in text. Reading honestly loses its purpose and it becomes an empty practice rather than a pathway to finding information and gaining insight. So, just to sum it up, comprehension is a very essential process, especially as a literacy component, because it ties together language proficiency, cognitive development, and function. And it honestly does provide reading with a purpose. So, one's not just reading to state words aloud. So, when we focus on improving comprehension, you're not just teaching students how to read, you're teaching them how to think and to learn and to process. And that leads to communication effectively. So, thank you.
With that being said, I think it's important to discuss some common misconceptions about comprehension. The first misconception that I want to mention is that fluency guarantees reading comprehension, which is just not true. So fluent reading is the ability to read accurately, quickly, and with expression, which is important in literacy development as a whole, but ultimately it's not necessary to express sufficient comprehension. So it can be seen when a student can read either loudly or independently, when they read smoothly, but they're not able to grasp that meaning, especially if there's bigger vocabulary words or it's in an unfamiliar context. So comprehension ultimately requires active thinking, connecting ideas, inferring, and strategies such as those that Natalie touched on earlier, which fluency or just reading smoothly and quickly does not give you. Another point is that answering questions is enough proof of comprehension. So answering comprehension questions can show some understanding, but it often uses more memory skills than actual comprehension of the text. Students are able to guess answers. We see in assessments when we use multiple choice or even fill in the blank when there's a word box, students are able to guess those out of the context or use different test taking strategies that they may have without actually constructing the comprehension needed from the text. And so, like I said, you can use different strategies where students are able to show real comprehension, whether that be a summary or connecting, explaining, or predicting ideas from the text. Those are all much better strategies that can be used. The third misconception would be that comprehension is a single skill. So comprehension is not just one skill. It's a complex interaction of multiple processes. It involves decoding, vocabulary knowledge, background knowledge, all of the strategies that Natalie mentioned on the first slide when we were discussing what comprehension is in the first place. You need to be able to use all strategies regarding literacy development in order to get comprehension. This kind of leads into my last 2 points. The first one being that low assessment scores are always because of struggles with reading comprehension. A low comprehension score doesn't always mean that a student is struggling with comprehension itself. This issue may stem from the other strategies that we just mentioned, decoding, vocabulary, background knowledge. Sometimes even the format of the test can impact comprehension. So students are able to understand the text when it's read aloud, but when they're just reading it, it may depend or not be able to decode can really impact that comprehension. Lastly, comprehension should be taught in isolation. Once again, not true. Comprehension is not a standalone subject, and it needs to be embedded across all content areas in order to increase the student's opportunity for learning in that subject area. So when students are able to learn best when comprehension is meaningful to them, whether that be in different subject areas. I know like some students like social studies or science or even different word problems in math, and they can get good comprehension and it's embedded in subjects such as those. So teaching comprehension in isolation ultimately just limits the transfer that comprehension has in reading.
All right, lastly, what are the most effective instructional strategies for comprehension? When it comes to the most effective instructional strategies, it's important to know that comprehension goes beyond just reading words. It's about understanding and thinking critically about the text. One of the most effective approaches is explicit strategy instruction, where teachers will directly teach students how to use strategies such as predicting what might happen next, asking questions as they read, clarifying confusing parts, and summarizing key ideas. It's important to do this at a young age. That way the student can carry that knowledge with them throughout their academic career and can use it across concepts. Think alouds are another powerful tool. This is when the teacher verbalizes their own thought process while reading to show students how skilled readers make sense of text. Guided reading allows teachers to work with small groups of students at similar reading levels to provide targeted support and gradually build independence. It also teaches students how to work in a group, how to collaborate, and how to bounce ideas off one another. Next, graphic organizers such as the hamburger chart, which I have a picture of here, which is usually used in lower grades to talk about the beginning of a story, the middle of a story, and all the details, and the end of a story, or a KWL chart, which is typically used in higher grades, helps students visually organize ideas and see relationships between concepts. Additionally, vocabulary instruction builds students' word knowledge and their background knowledge, which is essential for understanding more complex texts. Text-based discussions and higher order questioning push students to cite evidence, make inferences, and think more deeply about meaning. Encouraging students to make connections to their own lives, other texts, and the world around them helps them relate personally to what they read. Close reading encourages students to reread short, challenging passages to uncover deeper layers of meaning or theme. And finally, using diverse and engaging texts ensures that students are motivated to read and see themselves reflected in the material, which increases both interest and comprehension. Lastly, it's important to note that all students are different. They have different learning abilities, different reading abilities, and different lifestyles. So while one of these approaches may work best for one student, it's not going to work best for them all. It's also important to know that one student might benefit from a mix of a bunch of different strategies. And on this last slide here, we have our references. Thank you.